Hey, Eric, did we enable that chat button?
We sure did not.
It's almost tradition now. That's the first thing we say.
Yeah, we're too busy talking about car shopping and haircuts, so
yeah,
we missed that.
Give everybody a minute or two to roll here.
Makes us still can't get over the antlers behind you there. It cracks me up every time.
Perfect. If I said just right here.
Just right, yeah.
It's like I got spirit animals here to protect me, you know.
Yeah, well, it's even today. It's like a wildcat with antlers, though. It's even better.
Yeah. It's like a jackalope, but it's a cat instead of a rabbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what we would call that, but
I don't know. We need a good name for that.
How about them cats, though, man?
I know. Well, we'll know more tomorrow. I'm nervous about tomorrow, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not nervous. Yeah, I think it's going to be fine.
I'm not.
I just don't know much about Louisville right now.
Same. I mean, to be fair, I rarely know much about Louisville because, well, they've been not great the last few years. I'll say that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm glad Eric's not nervous, so that's good.
Yeah, I feel better now.
I would never be nervous. I trust in our cats.
Hope and Pope, right? I mean,
yeah, I keep a cat in the house just because I love him so much. You know what I
mean? Yeah, exactly.
I keep two.
I have to admit, I think one of the reasons that we got our first, or my first cat anyway, like personal for me, was because he was orange, kind of looked like a wildcat. I have to admit that had to have played a factor into it. So
yeah, sure, yeah, same. Mine's orange too. Must be the same reason. I mean,
same reason, definitely same reason.
True story. I just walked outside to get some air before we hopped on here, and I noticed some little kitty cat footprints on my front porch, and I noticed some kitty hair on one of my chairs on the front porch, and I was like, well, there's an outside cat hanging on my porch. First of all, I want to try to see this cat. Might be a cool cat, but it's the holiday season, man. Put some food and water out for this guy, right, or girl, whatever it is. So put a little dish of food and water out there for the street cat I've got roaming on my front porch, and maybe he'll be a good mouser hanging around outside the house.
Yeah, or like a baby wildcat, and then you're gonna have a whole other problem. But
no, his paw prints were this big. They were
tiny. Little ones. Okay,
yeah.
all right.
Teeny tiny. Yeah. All right, welcome everybody to
you're one of those neighbors that always bother me, man, where I'm like, my cat gets out, goes missing, and then I'm like, where is he? Oh, he's living at someone else's house because they put food out for him.
Totally possible. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Hackle Box. Got the whole crew here today. How you guys doing?
Good, man. Good. Busy, but good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Friday.
It is Friday.
Friday. Yeah. It can't be a bad day on Friday, right?
That's right. No. Every Friday is a good day. So real quick, I see Marcus in the chat. We got Rob and the Natty versus Louisville back in 2013. So there's good news about that, Marcus. That Natty is vacated. So it doesn't even exist anymore. So technically you guys never even played that game. So
I think they should have got it. That's my thoughts on that.
I think so. Just default to Michigan.
Yeah, just default. Yeah.
All right. We always like to start with something random. It's almost Christmas time. We were like, I can't believe this 12 days away from Christmas. December has flown by, I think, because we had such a late Thanksgiving this year. But my question for you guys is, are you ready for Christmas? You prepared for Christmas? Got all your shopping done? Your decorating done? Your plans in order?
Absolutely not. So
no.
Yeah, no. So much stuff to do, man.
I don't shop for Christmas till 2 days before Christmas. So
no.
No, not at all. Not at all ready. That's for sure. I mean, the biggest thing we got to worry about is buying for the kids that still live in the home, and no, we're not even close to done with that. So, and then there's always like the little gifts for other people, extended family and whatnot, and we have lots. I bought myself a lot of things though. So well, on top of that one, I think that's the thing is like, how are you going to buy for everyone else when there's Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals? You know what I mean? That's when you buy for yourself.
I may or may not have picked up a few things that I've been wanting for a little while. Yeah, you got to.
But yeah.
I mean, I'm going to have a freight truck arriving next week. Don't worry about it.
I'd say I'm like probably 90% ready. I got all our
Look at you.
decorations up. The house is done. We've got most of our shopping done. Most of the things are ordered, right? I'm still waiting on some stuff to come in, but then just wrapping some gifts and all that, like 90% there, which makes me feel pretty good. You guys excited for Christmas?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely excited for it. So it's always fun.
Decoration wise too, we're pretty good there. We have 4 Christmas trees up, so don't you worry.
All right, yeah. Well, you're showing me up. I've only got one,
So,
man.
well, I guess we're 90% there if you count Christmas tree percentages. You know what I mean? We're doing it.
What's your favorite Christmas tradition?
All right.
Should have this one already in the back pocket, man. Didn't we just talk about this on Monday?
We did,
We did.
yeah.
We did.
I'll kick it off. Simple.
Yeah, go ahead.
We celebrate Minxmas here at the house, but Minxmas includes a fried chicken dinner, mashed taters and gravy, some mac and cheese, right? All the carbs and fried chicken. And then Erica always makes a Kentucky butter cake with a bourbon caramel reduction sauce. And so we have a big chicken dinner, finished off with some butter cake with a bourbon sauce, and coast right into nap time and enjoy a nice lazy Christmas.
Yeah,
mine's a lot less thorough, man. I just we as a family always get like kind of matching-ish Christmas pajamas. I like just lounging around in Christmas pajamas and watching Christmas movies. Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do the I think I've probably mentioned this before. We do the fancy cheeses and sausages. And so we'll just go kind of load up on a bunch of weird cheeses, things we don't buy normally throughout the year, like a cranberry something or another, or whatever we can find at the store, and just kind of pig out on them, start Christmas Eve. And then I usually eat on them until about mid-January, it seems like, because we get way too much of it. But yeah, it's always just a fun little thing, man.
Nice.
A little simple one.
Nice. Well, I hope you guys both and everybody listening here today with us has a wonderful holiday, nice Christmas, get to spend some good time with friends and family, and forget about work for a few days. Hopefully everybody here can forget about work. Theme of the day is like it's Breachmas, baby. It's Breachmas. Every year. It's kind of a pattern. So Pink, you guys have been pretty busy, I would say, the last second half of the year, but even more so the last few months.
It's I mean, the whole year's been nuts, right? I mean, we're almost double the amount of cases that we worked last year. But yeah, it's funny enough, this year on Thanksgiving, we actually did not have a rowdy case come in or have one ongoing during that time. We had some cases, but nothing that was too crazy. So that was a nice little break for everybody. But now I'm worried a little bit we're going to pay for that during Christmas, because it has been ticking up a little bit. Just a lot of kind of random things too, just stuff that we don't see a lot of throughout the year, just different types of attacks and things like that. And so, yeah, man, always a little nerve-wracking for our team this time of year. So we'll
tell us a little bit about the techniques you've been seeing here recently.
Yeah, so we've seen your good old standard ones, right? Some kind of vulnerable external facing system that gets hit and then pivot to like ransomware, that kind of thing, right? We still see plenty of those. Still seeing plenty of the good old email compromises around like the evil jinx and the like evil proxy style attacks. I mean, those are still all the time. But have been seeing a little more like web server compromise, things like that. Stuff I've not seen a ton of over the last few years. We would occasionally get a few, but it seems like in the last few weeks we've had a few more hits on those. Some different some different families of malware that have been kind of out there. We're not seeing our old friends like QuackBot and TrickBot and stuff like that as much anymore. Been seeing a little bit of a resurgence of Cobalt Strike though, so that's been interesting and kind of fun for us, because we've been dealing with that for years. Not seeing obviously still seeing plenty of the AnyDesk and Screen Connect and those kind of things, but interesting to see like Cobalt Strike start popping back up out in the wild a little bit more. So
in those cases where you've observed Cobalt Strike, I know that's something we've talked about on here, is like more people are living off the land, using these off-the-shelf products to kind of navigate, maneuver in the environment. When you're seeing Cobalt Strike pop back up, are they using that as like a primary mechanism for navigation in the environment and redundant connectivity, or is this like, okay, there's AnyDesk in there and they're kind of deploying this as a secondary point of ingress in case the AnyDesk implementation gets burned?
Yeah, well, to be honest, it's kind of tough to say because the login, obviously there's no real login on Cobalt Strike, but login around AnyDesk and Screen Connect and that kind of thing is really dependent on how it's configured, right? And attackers try to not configure it in a way that it logs. So a lot of times we're just seeing the multiple tools on a system, and then we'll see where that system, hit another system or something like that. So it's hard to say exactly what's being used sometimes. So I'm not sure if it's moved back into primary status. Just we haven't seen enough of it lately. It just kind of started popping back up a little bit more. So
yeah,
we'll probably have a better idea here in a few months, I'd say.
So phishing's still king. It's always going to be king, right? I don't think that's going to go away. I think one thing I did observe in some of your case notes is we did have at least a case or two that involved some Teams phishing as well, right?
Yeah, we've seen more Teams phishing lately too, and even just straight up phone calls, just actual phishing attacks. But we've seen several of those where it's random number into maybe somebody's Teams. They've got a public phone number or a phone number attached to their Teams, and they get a call on that. And then the good old scam that's always, it's been around for years of, hey, support wants you to install a tool so that we can help you do a thing or whatever, right? And so definitely seen a couple of those recently that started with phone calls. We've seen some more of the just people being targeted through Teams. I'm not sure we've seen too many successful ones like that. People are pretty aware of that, and that's good. I'm really glad to hear it. But as always, if you don't need external messaging on Teams, shut that down, because that is a good way to come at somebody, because people inherently trust what they're getting on Teams because you're doing work stuff there all day long, that kind of thing. So
yeah, that was going to be my next question. What's your recommendation for folks? And I'm assuming, if you don't need that, shut it down, right? There's no reason to enable that service if you're not using it as part of your business functionality.
Yeah, exactly. I saw Jake asking out in the chat there too, kind of like, what about web server compromises? More vulnerabilities being exploited, like unpatched, unmitigated vulnerabilities being attacked, kind of thing. So,
yeah. Cool. Well, it's Breachmas. I think everybody just be aware. We always say this every year. We know that and not just for your business, right? For your personal life, your family and friends, make sure folks are aware that the frequency of those attacks are going to increase. So do your part. Tell your mom, tell your grandma to be on the lookout. Don't click links. Don't put any information in. Verify the email is expected. If it's not, make sure you're not giving up any of that information, because I think a lot of our older generations here, people who are less knowledgeable and aware of this going on, are those that are likely going to fall victim as we enter the full-fledged season of Breachmas here.
Yeah, those USPS notifications you're getting on your phone are probably not legit either. So,
what's frustrating about that, real quick. I was joking. I wasn't joking earlier when I said I may have a freight truck delivering to my house next week. I do. And before I even got like a shipping notification or anything from like the person I bought the thing from, I got a text from FedEx being like, schedule your delivery. And I was like, nah. And then I was like, well, shoot, man, that might actually be my freight delivery that I need to schedule. And there was nothing. That was the only thing I got, was a text message about it to schedule it. And I finally was just like, I'm taking, I am expecting a freight delivery. So I've been like, I did the thing and it was real, but it looked very much like something I would never trust and never click on. It took me 3 days to convince myself to click that damn link. So yeah.
Just sweaty palms, and just like, I gotta do it. Gotta click it.
I'm like, I just brand new phone. I'll just wipe it. You know what I mean? It's bad. Oh goodness. But they need, like, I feel like there needs to be some business decision on that side. Is like, we shouldn't send things that look like phishing or smishing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got one this week too, and it was legit. It was an order I made for a Christmas gift, but it was the same as you. I'm like, do I not? And then I ended up just reaching out to the vendor directly, like, hey, did you guys set me up for this information via text message? And like, yeah, we need that information. It was an update to my address, right? I have a new address, so sometimes it's funky in like the FedEx system or whatever. So it's just validating my address was correct, but same boat as you. And then I have had others this week too. I had one more actually this morning that was a straight up fish. And it's just like, which I played with him a little bit, but it wasn't a link. It was just a phishing text that was trying to get information from me. So
Jake in chat just said that his wife asked him yesterday about a malicious spam USPS text she got. That reminded me, it was like last week, my wife, Sarah, I think I said something. I was like, I'm like, man, I'm getting a lot of these spam texts. It's like holiday season, about whatever. I don't remember which one it was. And I was like, I got one that just now that said, or I got one earlier today that said this. And she's like, oh yeah, I got that one once. Or she's like, I got that too. She's like, I only tried to log in once though. Like I mean, like she's not normally that dead. Like I honestly thought she was serious for a second, and I like snapped my head over and looked at her, and I was like, "You what?" And she's like, just started cracking up laughing. She's like, "I didn't click on it. I didn't try to do anything." But it was the way she said it. She got me, man. She got me. I got immediately scared.
Well
That's
done.
awesome.
Well done.
Yeah. Cool. You guys want to hit a few topics, and then also it's annual tradition now. I'm going to close today's episode with a reading of the Night Before Breachmas. So
Nice.
let everybody know who's listening right now. Get your hot cider, your comfy slippers on, and we'll snuggle up around the virtual fire here and have story time.
Get your matching Christmas jammies. Get a nice blankie. Tuck yourself in.
Yeah.
Make yourself a person burrito.
Cool. So big topic I had to talk about is there's a Chinese threat actor associated with some attacks ongoing, where it seems like most of our major cell carriers have hooks from this Chinese entity today. From what I understand right now, there's 8 carriers that are affected. The ones that keep popping up at the top of the list for me in the news, AT&T and Verizon. But essentially, we've discovered there's threat actors that have been able to infiltrate these carriers, and they now have the ability to intercept phone calls, text messages, and even metadata related to phone use. And my understanding on that is you see your call logs, you see your test logs, who you're communicating with, and when you're communicating with them. And so I don't know, I want to have an open conversation about this. I can't say I was surprised when I seen this, just considering some of the things we know about our carriers. However, it was interesting to see some of the recommendations that's coming from our agencies as a result of this. And also I'm a little surprised to see that hasn't really been a lot of information about how this happened, about how the progress is, and they're actually been able to recover from this attack and eradicate the attackers from those carrier networks. And so, yeah, this is a really, really interesting ongoing issue that's likely affecting everyone who's listening to this today.
Yeah, I mean, my take is sort of, because a lot of it was focused initially on text messages, right? Particularly in between different types of phones, or like an Android to an iPhone or whatever, because they're unencrypted and that kind of thing. But I mean, I kind of always assumed those were insecure. You know what I mean? Like that one didn't surprise me. What does surprise me is kind of what you were saying there about, it seems like they still have hooks. Like, I'm not sure they have been eradicated, and several of these companies have very large instant response presences in the world, and that kind of, what's going on there? Like, how are they approaching it? And like you said, there's no information on it, so it's tough to get a handle. I mean, obviously things can be difficult to eradicate, and these are big networks, right? Difficult to turn a large ship around, kind of thing. But yeah, I'm curious. I would love to see some details on kind of what's going on. Even a high level would make me happy to get a handle on it a little bit.
Yeah, you're right, man. It's like AT&T and Verizon in particular are 2 of the biggest incident response providers as far as third-party services go in the United States right now. And so, little surprising to me, there hasn't been more transparency to this point and what's actually happened, what the progress is, what the recovery plan is. And then also, too, it sounds like this has been ongoing for a significant amount of time. And so that's concerning for me as well, that you got the guys who are supposed to be kind of, leading experts in our field and what we're doing today. And however, they've been infiltrated by Chinese attackers for, at this point, we have no idea how long. We just know that it's been stated as an ongoing attack, which makes me believe they've had hooks for a significant amount of time.
Yeah, part of me is like concerned about something like that. And then the part of me is just kind of like, yeah, it feels like an always has been moment for me. I don't know. It's like, if it's not the Chinese government, it's our own. I've never considered that to be a thing that I'm like, I have privacy in any way, or like I'm not, sending over sensitive data over typical general base protocols and stuff like that. I think we've always known that. You know what I mean? Like I think it's just one of those things that's ingrained into us to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
How long back can you think where TV shows said get to a secure line? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like
Yeah.
everything's tappable, everything's spyable, everything's whatever.
Yeah.
It's like to some extent, I mean, like, yeah, that's whatever, but like to some extent, I'm also just like, yeah, I mean, we know that to some extent, like this stuff isn't going to be, shouldn't be, you know, sensitive or whatever. You shouldn't
Mm-hmm.
assume it's secure. But yeah, there's a concern that it's like, yeah, okay, now it's another government. There's other things. There's beyond kind of the base level, noise level kind of threats to those things and lack of privacy in those things. And you'd like to see more action or more transparency or more something, right? Like more words at least
Yeah.
about it to give you at least some kind of level of feeling like someone's doing something.
Yeah, I'm with you. My initial feeling is why I said I wasn't surprised to hear this. It's
Mhm.
like always has been. I can't say I'm surprised, but it's more so the flip side. Like, just hey, tell me what's going on. Tell me what our recovery path is. Tell me how long they've been in there, and what you know at this point. And I'm with you too. It's like, I was talking to a friend who's very non-technical about this earlier this week because he'd seen it in the news. And he's like, "Oh man, what do I need to do? What do I need to do?" I'm like, "Well, you're just an average Joe who's sending information and having phone calls with that threat actors honestly wouldn't care, right?" So even if they have access to your information and the ability to get that information, think of how many millions of people they have access to their information for. And if they're prioritizing, but sorry, I know you're pretty important in your own mind, but in the case of our threat actors here, you're not a very important target. And so most of your data is not going to be at risk here. And so like helping, I don't know, people understand, that's my thoughts as well. It's like, yeah, I mean, I'm not sharing anything over those channels that I would even care for the most part if it was intercepted. That doesn't mean we don't have a right to have privacy there. We absolutely do. But on the flip side, just because like what you said with our government surveillance programs already in place, like I know that if someone wants that information bad enough or they need that information bad enough, it is already obtainable if I'm using those standard protocols.
Yeah. And Cliff said in chat there just now, Talos briefed us in Salt Typhoon in August 2022. It's just finally getting the mainstream press now. And it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, this isn't new. So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the comment there too from Josh about, companies using SMS for MFA, right? Like certainly opens up some avenues there for being able to intercept those codes and that kind of thing and be able to log in. So that is a concern as well. But yeah, it's for me, it's just more on the instant response guy side of it. It's like, what's going on? Like, how are you unable? And honestly, it could be because they don't know how far back this goes. How many times have we worked an attack and it's like, well, we can see that this has been going on since logs are available. And so then you don't know how long they've actually been in there. So they don't know how far to go back to recover and things like that. And they can't just, these are, again, big organizations that can't just sort of wipe and replace everything.
Well, and there might be multiple hooks in too. There might be a lot of unknown just how it came through or where it came about, there's a lot of infrastructure there. There's a lot of different things, a lot of different players, and you know what I mean? Like a lot of shared resources, a lot of all kinds of stuff. When you talk about stuff like this, that makes it probably very difficult to know fully. That you can know some of the extent, but knowing the full extent can be difficult. And yeah, I mean, you think about this too, like as Josh said for the SMS for MFA. I mean, cool. We have like RCS, kind of starting to push toward that, and that would get and encryption and stuff like that in place. But even when all that's even if you're Android to Android or iPhone to iPhone and it's encrypted, or even if RCS gets that between the different services and stuff and that's encrypted, that doesn't mean that the automated APIs that software is using and stuff like that are going to be sending those encrypted, right? And they're going to be relying on the cheap method of getting something to you, those lower protocols, right? They're still going to be sending SMSs. So even once people are better, maybe that doesn't mean necessarily the underlying systems that are doing things for like MFA are going to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the good thing, I still look at just the numbers again and understanding, like, so far what we know is it seems like only political officials, high ranking folks in politics or government agency have been targeted at this point. And this also is, Salt Typhoon is a government-backed organization from China, so I would say it's more related to espionage and data harvesting than anything. So when I think about our common day-to-day practices, even in business practices, most of the time we're going to be below that radar where they would be targeting, and then considering too, like, SMS for MFA, like we said, is not an ideal delivery method for those tokens, and that doesn't change. Like, it's always been the case. But then understanding too the lifespan of those tokens, right? And if you utilize that token, it's no longer valid. And so if you're actively receiving that as part of a login, you're inputting that, the token's no longer valid. Well, it could be intercepted. That's, I'm not debating that. I think the likelihood of that being compromised as part of this is still pretty low.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it was interesting though to hear that CISA had recommended folks start using Signal or WhatsApp for text messaging, which I think is a great recommendation. But it was funny. I think the FBI had said they recommend people use responsible encryption methods, which I kind of laughed at because, in the past, the FBI has kind of spoken out about how that if folks are using Signal or WhatsApp and they're in the middle of an investigation, it can kind of thwart that investigation and hold up that investigation because they can't decrypt those messages. And so they're kind of forced, their hand is forced here to make a decision. So it's like, use responsible encryption. And so to me, what does that mean? That's encryption that the FBI could decrypt. So are they for it? Are they not for it? What's going on here?
Yeah, use the TSA lock equivalent of encryption, please.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So to be clear, I think just for all our listeners and make sure they understand right now too, if you are texting like Apple to Apple right now, it is encrypted. And if you're doing Android to Android RCS, right? So if you're using like Google Messages or whatever, like that is encrypted. But if it's cross-platform, if you're texting Android to Apple or vice versa, those just default back to an unencrypted SMS message, right?
Or to like older phones or people don't have that set up, right? Like some people have, generally, I think iPhones and stuff like that have been using Apple Messenger or Messages or whatever that is that they uses for a while. So that's probably good. I know a lot of the Android stuff, just because of multiple different manufacturers and stuff like that, didn't have a standard that all the phones were supporting for a while. So
yeah, I know the RCS was only recently rolled out to like Samsung devices.
It's been around and in the making for a long time, but
Yeah.
there's been a lot of push against it from players. So
yeah. I'm happy
to have
now.
proprietary schemes versus adopting an open scheme. So
Yeah, I'm happy at least now. If you want to share like pictures or videos with friends, with the RCS adaptation, I can actually get high quality pictures and videos now. Whereas before, like if I had friends from iPhone trying to send me a video, it would always compress and grain out to the point I couldn't even tell what I was watching most of the time. So I was at least a little excited about
I feel
that.
like that was on purpose. I don't understand some of the protocols to that deep a level, but I know using normal SMS, I never got that bad of a photo.
Yeah.
So I feel like iPhone was just like, we're just going to be like, you should get one. Here's how bad your photos are since you don't have one.
Yeah. So another question, and I'd read about this, is what your guys' opinion on is, I've seen like some of the telcos or the carriers are getting some pushback right now and flack because they're not actually notifying people, right, who've been affected by this. So we only know what's been reported, and what's been reported, like I said, is it's high-ranking government officials. But what about everybody else? And there's been no notification process. And should there be a notification process? I think there should, obviously. But more importantly, do you guys think the carriers are ever going to offer transparency and tell me or you or anyone else who's affected by this that your data was impacted?
My primary question is, because I don't know too much about the cause, right? The in and do they know? Do they know what's been affected?
Yeah.
Or are they just saying, well, look, just like we've talked about this so many times, right? Cases, it's like we have no evidence to support the data was exfiltrated or something like that, right? Well, okay, but you have a lot of data that supports that they could have and had access to the data, right? So it's things like that. It was like, is this a situation where they're saying, well, as far as we know, it's only affected these high-ranking things because specific events have happened that indicate that they were compromised. It wasn't so much that they saw evidence in their networks or in their resources that suggest that it was compromised. It's more that was what was rooted out from something else that happened. And so that's my concern, is like they don't know. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
kind of my thought on it too. I figure if we do get a notification, it's going to be one of those you may have been impacted, blah blah blah. Like a very
Mhm.
generic statement. Yeah, because my hunch is that they probably don't know specifically. It's like Eric's saying they've connected the dots because of something else that happened. So
Mhm.
it's kind of how I would expect it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think too, and just thinking about like next steps, what are the implications of this that we were going to see in the next, 5 to 10 years? I don't think there's going to be anything immediate realistically. But for me, it's like that push towards, so I go back to the FBI and thinking about responsible encryption, right? So I think they'll probably start working together with the carriers to use the TSA encryption model so that the FBI can have access to that. And I personally still would support seeing a push toward like, why can't we start moving toward encrypted calls? I understand like the volume of data would increase, but like we're getting better at handling that and having larger volumes of data accessible to people. We already see end-to-end encrypted calling is available in Signal. I don't use WhatsApp, but I assume it's available in there as well. Hell, I think even like Facebook Messenger is end-to-end encrypted, and they offer encrypted calling as well. So like all these third parties are already doing that. Do you guys think we'll get to a next level standard where just we are operating on encrypted text channels and we're all operating on encrypted voice channels as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably going to be like you said, it is going to be that TSA model of encryption. But yeah,
Mhm.
I do think so. I mean, encrypted calling's still a thing. I mean, it's I don't know. I just did one like an hour before we hopped on here, not because I was trying to be sneaky or whatever. It was just that the person called me using Signal. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking about buying a car. It wasn't that. I see Eric's
Yeah.
face.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
A
But
stolen
my
car.
a
A
Jesus.
stolen
stolen
car. Yeah,
car.
yeah. I mean, I didn't say how I was
Yeah.
buying the car. Bitcoin's way up right now, man. We can just, trade. But but yeah, and it's still, I mean, it's just it's kind of hokey, right? I mean, it's still a little bit
Mhm.
flaky if you don't
It's
have a
still
solid
very
connection.
compressed, right? Like it
It is,
sounds
yeah.
super compressed still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
kind
don't
of
know where I was
sounds
going with that.
like Steven said, we need to go back to two cans in a string. Well, if you're
Yeah.
using Signal encrypted calling, it kind of sounds like we're talking on
It
two cans in a
does a
string.
little bit, yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Cool. Yeah, I guess the other thing too, the last topic we'll move on is, so like I mentioned before, like we haven't learned a lot. What was really surprising to me too is like even, thinking about we see in the chat here is I think that we've had an idea, or our agencies have had an idea that's been going on for probably a couple of years, right? And then we're just now getting to the point of public transparency. We're starting to hear about it, but more so like there's been no independent reviews at all, right? No third party review, no independent review. Like they're letting these carriers kind of continue to grade their own papers right now. When I think about like our government's interaction and what they should be doing, to me, it is like we need to force the issue and have independent organizations or entities review and determine what's going on, so we have something to consume for our agencies to make decisions and also be able to, develop a plan for public transparency here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least they're bringing in an independent review now for this.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. MFA AuthQuake. I love that name. What do you guys think about that? I read that. I thought it was cool.
We've had some good names over the last few years, so I have to admit.
Yeah. Yeah. So essentially, it's a new brute force attack to gain access to Microsoft online accounts to defeat multi-factor authentication. Eric shared this one. It was funny. He shared this. I'm like, hey, have you guys seen this? And he's like, I already shared that with you. I should read your links. I'll stop sending your emails to auto delete now, bud.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. Oh, it's Eric again. Just delete that.
Yeah, I don't know, Eric. You want to explain this one to us?
Yeah, I mean, this so there's a situation was, when you go to, I mean, this, and commonly on most websites, stuff like that, when you go and start interacting with the site, it's going to create some kind of session ID, kind of track your session even before you log in, right? With Microsoft, it when you go to log in and you get your options for your MFA, if one of the options is, kind of that typical 6-digit code you'd get from your Google Authenticator, Microsoft Authenticator, whatever authenticator, though you have up to like 10 attempts, essentially is kind of how it was coded. At least they've done some fixes, but you had 10 attempts before it would kind of lock you out, essentially, right? But those 10 attempts were to the session, and you can constantly create sessions. You can have multiple threads go hit the site, kind of create a new session and attempt login with it. And so essentially what you could do was do some very heavy brute forcing by creating tons of sessions, getting less than 10 per session attempts and not locking things out. It was kind of discovered, I believe about 6 months ago, somewhere around there by a security researcher group. And then it was they were notified of it, and they put out a temporary fix within a month or something like that. And then they have recently done a permanent fix just a little bit ago, month ago or something like that, right? Last month. So, but yeah, I mean, for a bit there, it was possible to do that and kind of heavily flood. The way it kind of worked out is um, they essentially were able to generally guess or get in, like brute force someone's MFA key, their 6-digit code, within about an hour, I think is what it said. There's a lot of factors that go into this. I mean, everybody knows those keys have a certain time limit on them. They roll every 30 seconds or so. But I think everybody also knows, if you've ever tried it before, when it rolls right as you read it, you're like, okay. And then you go to type it in and you see it rolls, it'll still accept it. There's some leeway that's given on those keys. And that is very typical. You're not going to have a 30-second general, like strict requirement. A lot of people will kind of stretch it out to a minute or something like that. What was found in the testing here was that Microsoft had it stretched out to about 3 minutes. So you get about 3 minutes to try to brute force that code. There's about 1 million options because you have 6 digits. And so generally you're not going to get it within those 3 minutes with the limit that you have, but within an hour of attempting, you're going to get it, is what they were finding. So yeah, thankfully it has been fixed, according to reports at least. But yeah.
So a question for you. So it's 10 failed login attempts are allowed before the account's locked out, right? Or those policies are implemented. But so there was no limit on how many concurrent like sessions you could create, right? So theoretically,
Correct.
you could initially launch 1 million concurrent sessions at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know the honest answer to that, because that's something I thought too, is like, why couldn't you actually get that down to a lot faster than an hour?
Yeah, right.
I'm assuming there was limitations in place. Now, whether that limitation was their own infrastructure or it was something that at some point, Microsoft was just like, no, I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I would guess it was an infrastructure limit. They didn't bother building infrastructure or whatever to make that attack happen faster, because what's the point? That your proof of concept doesn't need to have that, right?
Yeah.
I assume one could probably make it run faster if this is still vulnerable. Yeah. This really. Go ahead.
My other question really quick was just understanding, like, so those OTPs typically last like an authenticator for 30 seconds and they roll, right? But I read that too, where it's like they determined that would be accepted for the session for up to 3 minutes, right? So my question though is, if they have that extension to 3 minutes, I'm assuming though still every time the OTP rolls in your authenticator app, that's another OTP it would accept. So if we're considering a 3-minute time frame, would that mean there's actually 6 valid OTPs that would authenticate that session at that point? There's 2 per minute, right?
Possibly. Yeah. I don't know exactly how like locked it is to that attempt. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, possibly something like that. And what I was going to say is, this really drives home, especially for app developers out there. When our team is doing web app pen testing and stuff like that, we've seen a lot of different implementations. There's a lot of things that people don't necessarily think of, and even Microsoft in this case not fully thinking about something, where a lot of people know, like, if you have a login, you need to have some kind of rate limiting. You need to have something in place that says you can't do this, you can't do that. But there's a lot of places and ways you can implement that, right? You have the way of saying, hey, you can only attempt this much per IP address, per session ID, per account, per whatever, right? Sometimes the difficulties appear in different areas, and so people maybe lean toward one or another, or they want to go a little bit more lax in some than others. You could easily say, well, if an IP is hitting you that much, well, then you could go through a proxy, or you could look at someone like a university, right, who's going to have potentially a bunch of students on campus all hitting from the same IPs, right? And so then that you're going to block people because a couple of different people failed to log in on, from that IP. So there's so much to consider in that a lot of people try to do the thing that's not going to have an impact to users, but at the same time be secure. And they'll do things like the session, because the session will generate, it'll get stored in cookies or in a header or something like that. And it's transmitted and it can track you at that point, right? But again, people can, circumvent that and reset that, remove that cookie, or remove that data, and then re-hit the site and get a new one. And so just the kind of lesson is to always think about how all that stuff's going to kind of affect things. Like, where's your rate limiting going to break down? Essentially, yeah, Microsoft had a rate limit in place of 10, right? But then you could just reset that rate limit over and over and over again infinitely. So that kind of being an issue. And we see things like that all the time.
Yeah.
Very common.
Yeah, another thing I read in there too is, I guess by default, Microsoft isn't alerting users for failed MFA tokens, right? So it's alerting for failed credentials. But however, like, you wouldn't even be notified if somebody has your password, but they don't have the right MFA token. And so that's an easy fix too and I don't know, maybe they enable that by default now. I hope they have. But if not, if you're an administrator, making sure you are alerting on those types of things, because I mean, shoot, that's something, Pinky, you guys look for. Most every case you work, I know that's something we look at internally. Are we seeing MFA failures? And if so, we should go investigate that account as likely compromised.
Yeah, it definitely gets logged, but there's not currently an alert for that, which, and I'm going to let Eric roll here because I don't have a ton to add to this one, but it does bring up a couple of other points that I'd like to make about that. But I want to go for it, Eric.
Well, I was just gonna say there's a certain statement to say, hey, it's not alerting when this fails. Okay, I don't know that it necessarily needs to, like, every time or anything like that.
No, not every time, but a threshold. Right?
50,000 attempts in 3 minutes.
Yeah,
come on. That should be logging something and alerting something somewhere. That's the other side of this too. It's like, fine, there was this bypass and rate limit, but at some point we need to say, like, there was some form of failure in login 50,000 times in 3 minutes, which that was quick math or head math. So I think that equates to about what they were doing. That's a lot. You know what I mean? That's insane.
Yeah.
It's definitely a lot, and it brings up kind of another failure of sort of Microsoft's process and this type of thing too, that if anybody from Microsoft stumbles on this, please tell me why this isn't possible, because there's got to be something that I'm missing. But we talk a lot about the evil Jinx attacks and things like that. So one of the big indicators of that is one session ID with more than one IP address assigned to it, right? You've logged in from somewhere else using the same session ID. To me, that doesn't seem like a hard one to alert on. You've got all the logging there. We can see this in logs. Like, can we not get one of those kind of impossible travel type alerts for that? Like, hey, multiple IPs using the same session ID, because that just shouldn't really occur that I can think of. And I feel like that's what I'm missing, is why can't we do that? But it would be such an easy alert / fix, because then if we have an alert, we could probably build conditional access policies and things like that around it to not allow that. But it's one of the huge indicators of, like, an evil Jinx attack is exactly that. One session ID, multiple IPs connected to it.
I mean, my guess right off the top of my head about why you don't want to be too sensitive about things like that is laptops and phones. I mean, moving locations.
But it should be moving around. Okay, I was gonna say it should be a different session ID, but you're right. Yeah, keeping that session active, going across different places. So
yeah, if you log in right now, close your laptop up, drive down to the Starbucks, go back, you don't have to log in again. It's the same session. It's right there. It's doing its thing. I mean, there's a certain amount of again, I mean, there's a lot of choices that are made in development and in security that are related to, let's make it as seamless and easy for the user, right? And so we have those things. But even then, even if that was the case, even if it logged you out when that happened for security purposes, you'd still be alerting every time something like that happened as well. And that would be very annoying very quickly for a lot of large organizations.
Yeah, I think the big thing there is, what we've talked about too, is having the conditional access policies for authorized devices, right? So your device has that fingerprint, the token, we know it's your device. So regardless of your IP, that's fine. But whenever we see someone trying to connect from a non-authorized device, it's denied and someone is notified that happened. Yeah, I seen that logic that Jake threw in the chat here. Like, every time, a 3% chance of getting the MFA right. After 24 such sessions, 70 minutes, a malicious actor would already pass the 50% chance of hitting a valid code. And my thoughts on that, like, is that really true? Is this really linear? Because if we're spraying, right, we're, mass spraying MFA codes. Like, okay, so maybe we covered 50% of the possibility over 70 minutes here, but we might have already sprayed the correct code, and then we're continuing to spray, and that code that we've already sprayed before is now the valid code. So I don't know. I'm math nerding a little bit, but I
one of the
argue that
things,
math is not true.
so I mean, one of the things as far as one of the comments you made earlier about something was, you know, when we're talking about the SMS stuff, is that when a code is used, it can't be used again, right?
Mhm.
One, that's an assumption that I wouldn't make per se, because I've seen a lot of poor implementations on things like that. Like,
Sure, that's fair.
but
Yeah.
second, that is true for things that send you a code. But if
Mhm.
you're talking about authenticator like a OTP, right, then that code is, you could use it 15 times as long as it hasn't expired. And so
Mhm.
it does, as soon as it gets a success, it ends. And then it tells you,
Mhm.
hey, we were successful with this code, and you put that code in and you're in too.
Mhm.
Um, and they have a demonstration on the articles and stuff, you know, like they're in the write up for it, or they're in their, yeah,
Yeah, I've
thing.
seen that.
And the video that they have is one where they got it really fast, and yeah, it just stops. It's
Mhm.
done. It doesn't continue.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, but I think on average, they're saying it's about an hour, because on average that hits about 50%. So that's going to be the average mark. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
again, I think you
Cool.
can make it go faster though.
Yeah. I guess the good news is it's fixed. I don't know exactly what Microsoft did to fix it. I don't think all the details have been shared. I'm looking at my notes. I think maybe they said they did put more rate limits in. We were talking
There
about.
are
I don't know what.
more
Yeah.
rate limiting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the restrictions now last for a longer period of time. So if you trigger those restrictions based on policy, it will be restricted for a longer period of time. I think it was like up to a half a day is what I read, which isn't very exact, but so I'm assuming it's hours now instead of minutes before. I think for all our listeners, like still keep using MFA. Obviously, this is just another example of why it's not a silver bullet. There will be new attack vectors to defeat it. But one big thing is like monitoring for those alerts, setting up alerts for failed MFA. You should be doing that because if somebody's got the password, not the MFA, it's an indicator that account's likely compromised. And yeah, I don't know. Any other recommendations from you guys?
Have good passwords too.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
honestly.
for sure. All right, cool. BYOVD. Eric's bringing some bangers today, man. Bring your own VD. I mean, vulnerable driver.
Yeah, bring your own VD.
Wait, what kind of podcast is this?
Yeah, this just took a turn.
Yeah. I tossed this one in here for us to talk about just because it's interesting, and I think that it can hit on a good topic. But there was some attacks. Some researchers uncovered some malware that was using a BYOVD, bring your own vulnerable driver. Definitely not the first time we've heard about this kind of a thing.
Mhm.
But yeah, they were using oh goodness, my brain, a vast anti-rootkit driver, to kind of register it as a system service, and then use that system service as a kernel driver to be able to close down and shut down different applications that were running or services that were running, such as endpoint protection and things like that, and then be able to kind of do whatever they want. Um, and I like to talk about things like this because it's one of those things that you hear it and you're like, oh yeah, that sucks. And also, yeah, I mean that's expected, right? It's expected behavior. It's not a vulnerability per se, right?
Yeah,
Um, and so it's important to kind of talk about some of those things sometimes where it's like, yeah, this is a way that someone can take advantage of something, and it's also probably not something that's going to be fixed because it is expected behavior. And so it's more about, talking about the type of layers of defense you can have and alerting you can have, and various things to determine whether or not that is being deployed or used in your environment. We've seen a lot of different attacks, a lot of different attack vectors, and discussion, I'm sure, from Pink and us at different times on this about living off the land, using different things that already exist, or trying to use the tooling that the administrators would be using, or developers would be using in that environment, so that it doesn't raise any suspicion, right? Um, and we've talked definitely to some level about bringing tools that are commonly used too. So maybe putting something like putty on a machine and then using that for some reverse shell type things, or some port forwarding type things out to another environment, because putty is decently used in a lot of environments. It's not going to raise any flags. This is just an extension of that, right? Bringing a vulnerable, I mean, they call it a vulnerable driver. I don't even know that I would use that term, but bringing your own
yeah,
driver to do these types of things this is a driver that is very common in environments. So EDRs aren't necessarily going to say, hey, this is a problem. And you might not be using it, but you might not notice that it stands out because nothing else telling you that it is, right?
Mhm.
And so, yeah. Now, I will say this: you're going to register a kernel driver as a system service. You're going to have to already be admin on that machine.
Mhm.
You're going to have to. Someone's already has to have compromised that machine pretty heavily. This is going to be more of the sake of now that I've compromised it heavily. How can I get rid of all the protections and just run wild, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, my big thing here is I've found multiple times that, and I think that anyone on my internal pen testing team and a lot of people out there can probably say, I have found several environments where people are not logging or alerting on creation of services, Windows services,
Mhm.
and that is a very quick gimme on this. It's like if you're logging those types of things and alerting those types of things, at least you know something fishy is going on when a service gets created. A standard user is
Mhm.
not creating services really
Yep.
hardly ever. And if they did on accident, it's because they installed something which you probably want to know about too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
The
absolutely
one,
agree.
yeah,
Go
the
ahead,
one
Nate.
kind of, I don't even want to say exception to that you just want to do some filtering. You'd want to have some logic
yeah,
built in, is that Defender registers like its new like vulnerable or its new database file. I mean, it's like a .sys with a weird name that I've
Mhm.
seen. It does register that, like it kicks out a 7045 of NID for a new service being created.
sure.
So you'd want to do some filtering on that, but that's really the only one that pops into my mind that you
I
wouldn't
think some other
necessarily
ones
want to
do it
know
too.
about.
Some other EDRs are going to do it. You'd want to filter
Yeah.
for the ones that specifically kick
Yeah,
off on their own, for sure.
Yeah. And it's startup and it's going to be super noisy. Like you reboot, you'll see a lot of 7045s at that point. But after a system's running, you shouldn't see a lot other than the Defender stuff there. But still, like you could tune that, right? If you're dumping all these logs in a scene, normalize your environment and know when you see this, like it's probably going to be something you look at. And then also, like Eric mentioned, like make sure basic users don't have the ability to install rootkit drivers or kernel level drivers. Like that's a big thing. And then
yeah,
we always talk about like application allow listing. Even if you don't want to get to a full blown application allow listing, space, you can't get there. Maybe I understand it's a really, really hard thing to do. But at minimum, you should be alerting when new services are installed. And you should be reviewing those and monitoring those as well, because this is such a novel thing. And it's like Eric said, it's not a vulnerability in any way. And when I see these types of attacks, it's like, oh, it's like novel, but it's really brilliant. Just finding something that's off the shelf. No EDR is going to trigger on. No, none of your tools are going to identify this as malicious, because it's actually, an anti-malicious tool to identify possible rootkits on a system. So they're likely not going to trigger on that, but you can use that power. I mean, it has kernel level access to do really, I mean, they're using it here to kill, EDR, but you could use this for whatever. Like you could manipulate this attack and use that driver to do all sorts of things that can be beneficial from a threat actor's perspective.
Yeah, for sure.
All right,
Cliff,
cool.
I don't know. I'm seeing Cliff's chat. I don't know. I've been using these for I've been using these for over a year, so they're definitely not new. I don't know if the other guys are using anything new, but yeah.
yeah. I
I've
moved over
actually
to
ditched
to
all
like
my
a
things. I'm using the old built-in microphone and the built-in
really
speaker here now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
good
seems to work
job.
all
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
yeah. I did switch to a standalone mic and just like a wraparound headphone set that just kind of sits on the ears because
Mhm.
I don't like the over the head thing. It just kind of hurts my hair after a while, and on the phone a whole lot now. So
Mhm.
kind of trying to make it a little more comfortable.
Yeah, my ears, like, I don't know, they get a little sweaty in there wearing those
Yeah,
over ears all day. It's
yeah,
like my
yeah.
ears get
Honestly, yeah.
warm, which is weird. Yeah. All right, guys, we only got 7 minutes left. Real excited. I think it's
Do
time.
it.
You got your hot cider, hot cocoa,
Well,
I've
get some
got a big
lunch.
sugar
bottle of water.
plums.
I'll just drink a lot
Nice.
of water while you talk.
All right. Full disclosure, I've drank a bunch of water and I've kind of got to pee, but I'm getting through this
I
first.
thought he was about to say full discllosure. I've drank a whole bunch today, and this might
Yeah.
get weird.
Full disclosure, I am drunk. Here we go.
Right? That's what I thought we were doing.
It is Friday.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. 'Twas the night before Breachmas, when all through the enterprise not an admin was stirring, no one would be wise. The updates had been applied to the servers with care, in hopes that the threat actor would not be there. The technicians were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of no emergency support requests danced in their heads. And all the executives enjoyed an evening nightcap before everyone settled for a long winter's nap. When out of nowhere, my phone made such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what's the matter. Away to the desk I flew and I slid, turned on the lights and opened my laptop lid. I was in such a hurry I'd stubbed my toe, but I opened my email because I needed to know. When what to my wondering eyes did appear, alerts for all my servers, I was struck with fear. They had all appeared so suddenly and quick. I knew in a moment it must be lockbit. More rapid than eagles, the encryptors they came, the CPUs whistled, screamed, and almost caught flame. My servers, my disks, and all my VMs. Oh no, this is bad, but maybe we can restore them. I log into Veeam to access the vault. Let's restore to them all. As the leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, I was met with an obstacle and I didn't know why. As we went through the library, our cursors, they flew with a vault full of backups that were encrypted too. And then in a twinkling, I noticed on the screen a new text file was written just for me. I scrambled to open and give it a read. These threat actors were very bad indeed. They encrypted all our data and gained full root. They made it out of the network with all of our loot. A bundle of data they exfiltrated out the back. These guys were evil, a full ransack. The ransom note was not nice and not very merry. They wanted all of our money topped with a cherry. They warned that the press and the commissions soon would know the deed was done and they had the proof to show. The trade secrets and PI was held tight in their teeth, and the DDoS bots circled like a wreath. They had a broad reach and the attacks were deadly. They found our weakness and targeted directly. It was a chubby and a plump, a right jolly old port. RDP open to the internet to help with remote support. In the blink of an eye, they'd harvested our creds, soon gave me to know I had everything to dread. I spoke not a word, but headed straight into work and disconnected the network cable with a forceful jerk. I reviewed the configs and more problems arose. We worked through the night, but I began to doze. But then I sprang awake when Microsoft Teams gave me a whistle, a message from our threat actor requesting full transmittal. And I heard them explain, don't put up a fight. Happy Breachmas to all, and to all a good night.
Good job.
Thanks.
It's
Clint,
also
it's not
good.
on our blog, I don't think, but we are going to be sending out a holiday newsletter to everybody soon. I think we're going to include it in that, then we'll get it up on the website. But yeah, hey, thanks to everybody for joining us all year. I do want to share with you guys, I was talking with our marketing team, and I think we're going to do like a kind of an AMA for our January episode. So ask us anything. If you got questions you want to talk about, we'll send out a notification early. You can send us those questions beforehand so we can make sure we get you in queue. And should be fun. I'm excited for a little AMA Hackle Box to kick off the new year. I don't know if you guys are. I don't know if I've told you guys that yet, but we're doing that in January. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I don't think you had, but I mean, awesome.
Yeah.
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah, I prefer not to know things, to be honest with you, so that's fine.
Just show up. Just show up.
But thanks everybody for a great year. I wish you all Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and hopefully you get to enjoy a little break, some downtime. Breachmas doesn't occur for you, and you get to enjoy time with your friends and family. So thanks everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
See you guys.